Welcome back to the Fresh Milled Sourdough course. I'm so excited about this module. This will probably be the longest one of them all because we have a lot to cover. If you're brand new to fresh milled flour, this is the perfect module for you. We're going to break it all down just from deciding you want to try it to storing it, where to buy it, which grain mills to use, all that good stuff. So before we get started, I want to just briefly tell you why that you would want to use fresh milled flour in all of your baking, not just sourdough. Fresh milled flour is the most nutritious flour that there is because the wheat berry contains 40 out of 44 essential nutrients. And when you freshly mill that wheat berry, all of those nutrients are intact. So the bran and the germ are there, and that is where the nutrition is. So in the early 1900s, late 1800s, mechanical sifting became all the rage because you could sift out the bran and germ and get this fluffy white powder that was just so perfect for pastries and pies and biscuits, and people fell for it. They loved it. It was addictive. And so unfortunately, after using it for a little while, people started to get sick. And that's because they removed all of the nutrition. And the bodies started yelling, I need that nutrition. Well, they found a way to chemically put it back in and fortify the white flour so that we could keep eating white flour, but we would have some nutrition back. Unfortunately, they only put just a little bit of nutrition back in there. And honestly, the wheat berry is one of the most perfect foods because of all the nutrition that's in there. So number one reason you would want to use fresh milled flour is the nutrition. Those 40 out of 44 essential nutrients are game changers for your health, and you need them. God created the wheat berry the way that he did because of the nutrition. And up until that time when they started mechanically sifting it, they milled it fresh just like we're talking about doing right now. And they were getting all of that nutrition. The second reason, fiber. Freshly milled flour is full of fiber. Fiber is important for healthy weight, healthy digestive system. It keeps you full longer, very satisfying and hearty. And it's just one of those things that especially in America, most people don't get enough fiber. And even if they eat fiber, maybe they take like a supplement, they don't drink enough water because you have to have enough water for everything to work as well. And we've just got off kilter there. So we need to be eating our fresh milled flour, drinking a lot of water, and it will completely make a change in your digestive system. I have suffered for years with stomach issues. And if I stick to a 100% freshly milled diet, I don't have those problems. And so I am a testament to how amazing eating fresh milled flour is. Now, the third reason that you would want to use freshly milled flour is flavor. If you've never used fresh milled flour, it is not like whole wheat flour from the store, I promise you. Fresh milled flour is flour in its most natural form, the way God intended it to taste, and it is so delicious. It is nutty, and it is in like soft white wheat, has almost a sweet flavor. So delicious. So good. So now that we've gotten that over with, let's jump in to what type of grain mill, or maybe you don't want a grain mill yet, what way could you use to mill these wheat berries at home? While there are several models of grain mills, there are basically two main types of grain mills. There's an impact grain mill and there's a stone mill. Now, the one that you choose will probably have a lot to do with one, price, or aesthetics. Now, if money is of no object to you, then you're maybe wanting a beautiful wooden stone mill. There are a few brands that you can look at. Nutrimill has one. I think it may be the least expensive wood one. And then Mock Mill and then Como. So Stone mills have two stones that can be adjusted by a dial, and the closer you get them, the finer the flour, and the further away, then it can even make cracked grains. So the pros to a stone mill is the flour is very cool when you grind your wheat berries in a stone mill. There is a huge span of coarseness and fineness with a stone mill because those stones can raise and lower, and you can go from the finest pastry flour to cracked grains. And that is really important if you're wanting to do things like cream of wheat or something maybe for your out backyard chickens and you're wanting to make some cracked grains. It's perfect for that, and it works amazing for that. But like I said, they are a bit more expensive. They are beautiful, and if you're worried about your kitchen and you have a very aesthetic kitchen, then I would, if you can afford it, then get the stone mill because you want something you can leave out on the counter and that you will use. Now for me, that's not an issue. I am a person that needs function out of my appliances. I don't care too much what they look like. I just want them to work, and I want them to work hard, and I want them to work for years. And so I personally, my first grain mill after my hand crank grain mill, we'll get into that in just a minute. My first grain mill was the Nutri-Mill Classic, and I still use it to this day. It is just a workhorse. It is easy to use, makes very fine flour, perfect for bread, and it's kind of set it and forget it type of grain mill. I recently got the Impact from Nutri-Mill, and that's the least expensive grain mill you can get. And I honestly fell in love with it. I really like it. They did an amazing job designing it. And it makes the best flour. I don't know exactly what they did, but the flour is perfect. And so if you're brand new and money is tight, 100%, I've been using the Impact grain mill now for a while, and I really do like it, and I think you will like it too. For beginners, it's so easy, and I'll show you the settings in just a few minutes on these grain mills. The last Impact grain mill that you can get is the Wonder Mill, and I have that one. I bought that as a spare some years ago, or maybe a couple years ago, and it works similar to the Impact mill in that it's two pieces that you put a tube in between them so that the flour flows through the tube into the container. It also makes a really nice flour. None of these are bad. They're all good. All the grain mills I'm going to talk about today, I would highly recommend. They're all capable of doing the job. But what is important is beginner friendly. Beginner friendly. Now, the stone mill takes some getting used to. But if you're brand new and you just have to have a stone mill, I will tell you that to make bread, I would grind the flour as almost as tight as you can get it. That's what I have to do to get the best flour. So whether it be the Nutri-Mill, whether it be the mock mill, there's a setting that you turn. It's either on top with the Nutri-Mill or on the side with a mock mill or on the front, I think, with a Como. It goes from finest to coarsest. I would go down to finest or maybe back it off just a little for my flour for baking with. And that way you're fine. You know you got it. But you play with it. So that's the thing with the stone mills. You kind of have to play with it. Just keep adjusting it until you get it to the consistency that works for you. Now, the great thing about an Impact mill is you don't have to think about it. The Nutri-Mill Classic, which is the one I've used for years, has two knobs. There's a top knob, and it is for the motor. That's how fast the motor runs. And so I always leave it all the way over to the left. I just always have. I've never really messed with it. And the bottom is the feed rate. That is how close the milling heads are together and how far apart they are. I grind all of my wheat berries at the 11 o'clock position, and I have for years, and it makes the perfect bread flour. Now for the Nutri-Mill Impact, they made it even easier. There's a number system, and for everything, I've used it for everything, is number 2. So you don't even have to worry about it. Just go to number 2, and it makes the most beautiful bread flour. Now, even easier is the Wonder Meal. They just have a bread setting, and that's all I've ever used on it. And so they do have a coarse and pastry setting on there, but bread setting is perfect. You don't have to change it. And so it's really beginner friendly. So all of these they're really simple to use. Set it and forget it. Now, you may be saying, that's a lot of information to take in. And it is, I understand. But I'm going to refer you to a video that I made, a couple videos. One is the Nutri-Meal against the Wonder Meal. One is the new Nutri-Meal Impact, and one is the Nutri-Meal Harvest. I'm going to link those down in the description box so that you can just go and watch them if you've got one that you're thinking about. And that way we can move on and you can get thinking about what kind of grain meal you want if you haven't already. Now, I do want to tell you that if you buy a Nutri-Meal, I have a coupon code. I'm going to put it across the screen here, Rose20. If you use it at checkout anytime, you can get $20 off of your grain meal, which is awesome. All right, so now we're going to move on to types of wheat berries and which ones work for which recipes. I've said this before probably 10 or 15 times, and I'm going to say it again because it's just true. If you are brand new to baking with freshly milled grains, I would 1 million, I used to say 100%. Now I'm going to say I would at 1,000,000% say get hard white wheat because it's just the easiest one when you're first starting out. You can use it for everything. You can use it for breads, for pizza, for pancakes, for biscuits. You can use it for everything. And it's just an all-purpose. I still use hard white wheat almost all the time. I like it. It's light. It's got a mild flavor, especially if you're trying to, switch everything over and your family's like, what is this? If you use hard red wheat, they're going to be like, wow, this is so, nutty and rich and too much flavor. Hard white wheat is so mild. You can really win people over with it. And so I highly recommend that you just get a big bucket of hard white wheat berries and go through those. And then if you want to add more wheat berries, you can. But as a beginner, do the hard white wheat. Where do I get my hard white wheat? I order from breadbeckers.com a lot. They have an organic hard white wheat in a 6-gallon bucket, and it's clean. That's the thing you got to think about. Make sure you use a really good source that has really clean grains because you don't want to damage your grain meal with rocks and things like that. But Bread Beckers is one of the cleanest. Pleasant Hill Grains is a little expensive, but they also have such clean grains. I have ordered my grains from Breadtopia. They're really clean. That's where I get my soft white wheat and my kamut from. I used to get my kamut from the Food Nanny, but she only gets small bags, and if you'll find out if you go 100% freshly milled wheat, those little small bags, they don't last no time. And so I always buy the big buckets. So let's say you decide, okay, I'm going to get started with this. I'm going to get a grain meal. I'm going to get the wheat berries. How do I store all these wheat berries? Well, I just keep them in the bucket that they come in if I order them in a bucket. So if you order from Bread Beckers, and they are the least expensive, at least for me. I know that it's based upon where you live, the shipping. But for me, Bread Beckers, they're in Georgia, and so to ship to me is pretty inexpensive. If you get their bucket, you don't have to worry about how to store it. They're going to last. You got an airtight lid on it so critters can't get in there. They're clean. They have been processed properly, and you don't have to worry about anything. Now, if you order in like bags, like the 25-pound bags, then I would go to my local Tractor Supply or farm supply store and get a food grade 5-gallon bucket that holds 25 pounds of grain, and make sure that you get a good tight fitting lid, and you'll be good. I'm telling you, once you get started in this, you go through the wheat berries a lot quicker than what you would think. I mean, they last. It's not that that you go through them like in a week or two, but they're not going to go bad in what time that it takes for you to use them. If you just keep them in, I keep mine in buckets here in my kitchen, and I have gamma lids on some I don't. I'm not really like a stickler with stuff like that, but I am with the buckets. It has to be in a bucket. Now, if I have some grains, like right now I have some oat groats that I am storing in my cold room, I do keep an oxygen absorber in those. And so, you might want to do that if you're going to be storing them for longer, because I don't use oat groats as often as I do wheat berries. I keep all of my wheat berries here. The unopened wheat berries I keep in my cold storage. They'll last for like 10, 20 years. You don't have to worry about them. If they're unopened, don't worry about it. They'll be fine. But if they're opened, I would say they would last. I mean, I've had wheat berries for a year sitting in my kitchen, and they were fine. So they'll be fine. I wouldn't worry too much about it. You'll get through them before you have to worry about them going bad. All right, so let's say that you want to get a few different types to try what wheat berries work best for what. I would say hard white wheat is perfect for any sourdough breads, yeasted breads, anything that you need to develop gluten and structure and that needs a rise. You're going to use a hard wheat. Hard red, hard white work perfect for that. Now, for biscuits and pastries, I really like using soft white wheat because it almost has a sweet flavor. It is so delicious when you make biscuits and muffins and cakes and things like that. So soft white wheat is a really good one to have on hand. You can buy like a small bag if you're not going to be using it that often. Now, it's not for use with like sourdough or yeast breads because it's very high moisture, low protein, and so you'd have a really hard time. Now you can add a little in if you wanted to. Maybe you have a bunch and you're wanting to use it up. I've done that before. You could put a little in there, but hard wheats are low moisture, high protein, so they're perfect for making breads. But that's the only time that you would need a difference. I for years have used hard white wheat in everything. Just in the past probably 1.5 to 2 years, I've bought soft white wheat, but hard white wheat will work for anything. I can't stress that enough. Just buy hard white wheat if you're just getting started and you'll be fine. You can make every recipe I'm going to show you. You can make the best sourdough breads ever with hard white wheat. Okay, so before we move on, ancient wheat is huge. Everybody talks about ancient wheat. In particular, einkorn. I get more questions about einkorn, I think, than any of the ancient wheat berries. Einkorn is like the oldest grain. It's really kind of like a grass grain, and it is very different from wheat or conventional wheat. Einkorn has this gluten structure that's very weak, and so it's hard to develop gluten. If you're doing it the same way you would with conventional wheat, you have to do it a little bit different. I mean, once you get used to it, it's not hard, but getting used to it takes a little bit of time. I'm going to briefly touch on that when we make our loaf of bread at the end of this. I'm going to insert a few little things for making an einkorn loaf for those of you who are just really wanting to try it, and I will include that because I don't want to leave you out if you're into einkorn. Kamut and spelt, they're pretty easy to learn. They're not that much different from conventional wheat, and you can start adding like half and half if you decide you want to get into ancient wheats. But let's back off of that for a few minutes. We're talking about beginners here, and we're talking about what's the easiest. And so we're going to do hard white wheat. Okay, so now I want to move on and talk about considerations you should take into mind when you start using freshly milled flour. As I said before, freshly milled flour has the bran and the germ intact. What happens is that bran and germ act like shards. And so when you're trying to build gluten and knead it, it almost is counterproductive because those shards will break those bands of gluten, and it just takes a while. I have found, and I think most people who bake with fresh milled flour agree with this, method, is soaking at least half of that flour in the water of that recipe for 30 minutes, even an hour is better. For like an hour, 30 minutes to an hour, and then moving on, softens that bran and germ so that you can start the kneading process and you're more apt to get the perfect knead. But we'll get into all that a little bit later. Just know that these are just some considerations. We're going to go slowly. But if you're at this point, you're like, oh, well, at least I want to make some yeast bread before I start making sourdough. I highly recommend soaking your flour. I have a really, really good, soft, fresh milled flour sandwich loaf recipe I'm going to link down below it turns out every time. And so I'm going to link it down below if you are brand new to fresh milled and you're wanting to slowly get into the sourdough. Make this loaf of bread. It gives you kind of an idea how fresh milled flour works before you actually start incorporating sourdough with it. Another tip that I would say is most people that I have answered their questions and worked through fresh milled flour with, they don't knead it long enough. Kneading is really important with fresh milled flour. And let's say you have a KitchenAid and it says to knead for 5 minutes. That's not going to work with fresh milled flour. You're going to knead for 8 to 10 minutes. You need until. That's my saying. You need until. You need until you can stretch that dough without it breaking. And it gets smooth, it gets glossy, and you can just tell, that it's ready to go. And even if you're doing stretch and folds like with sourdough, it's the same thing. You stretch and fold until you have a soft, smooth, stretchy dough. And then you're good to go. And so I always kind of cautious about telling people, like in my recipes, I'll say knead 8 to 10 minutes on speed 2. That's just kind of giving you a guideline, because I have heard some people say that they knead for like 15 minutes. I have kneaded that long before, but it's because I forgot that it was kneading. Most of the time it's around 10 minutes, and that seems to be perfect. Okay, so there is a way that you can grind your wheat without using a grain mill. You can actually use the dry container of a Vitamix to grind your wheat berries. I did that for a while when I first started. You can also buy hand crank grain mills for pretty inexpensive. Now, keep in mind, they're really hard to use and they don't get the flour very fine. And so just keep that in mind. I used it and made bread with it, but just keep that in mind. These are just ways. You can also get an attachment for a KitchenAid mixer that grinds wheat berries. There's a few little different options if you're just wanting to try it out and make sure that it's something that you will actually stick with before you make the investment of a grain mill. Okay, I hope that wasn't way too much information for you. I think I condensed it down as well as I could. So what I want you to do right now is head to the comment section and ask away. If you have any questions, we're going to have a huge Q&A at the end of this course. And I also want you to go to the description box and look at all of the resources I have. I have free printables. I have some blog posts that are really important when you're first getting started using freshly milled flour and sourdough. I have a couple of videos that I want to share with you that I was talking about earlier. Also, I wanted to tell you, I hadn't mentioned this before, but I think it's important. I'm going to be adding to this course as time goes on. So we'll finish the course, but if there's something that changes, or a new grain mill comes out, or a new mixer comes out, or a new something comes out, or maybe I start using a different type of wheat and I want to share that experience with you all, I will be updating this course as the years go on. So always keep an eye out for, it'll say fresh milled course bonus video or update video. And I also have some bonus videos that I'm going to be adding to this course, so be looking out for those as well. All right, well, we made it through the module about wheat berries. Next week, we're going to talk about all the tools that you'll need to get started with sourdough and fresh milled flour. So let's meet here again, same day, same time next week, and we'll see you all really soon.